Brian Foster coming to you live stream on YouTube on November 7th, 2021. Time zone throughout the world. And today we're talking about chapters 28 and 29 of Wander in the Spirit Land. And we've gone through many chapters with the Spirit Franchezzo when he started as a person that just appeared in the lower zone. He had just met the love of his life and died soon after, very full of regret. And he was still had a lot of primitive emotions like we all have. But then his wonderful love, who was still in the physical realm, talked to mediums and tried to help him become better. And really, throughout the whole thing, she was kind of the shining bright star of his life. And she helped him lose a lot of his hatred and pride and quest for revenge, all the things that we always have to take out, life by life, little by little. And before I start again, we always talk about Spiritism. So this is not a Spiritist book by a Spiritist medium. What I do is I read these books on Tuesdays and I say, what is the parallel to Spiritism? What does Spiritism have to say about his view of the spirit world? And it's amazing. It's just more and more parallel Spiritism. So enough of that. Let's get started. Let me read this text along with us. And this is chapter 28, My Home and Work in the Morning Land. I was not, however, destined to remain in the land of dawn. My home was now to be in the circle of the morning land, and I was therefore escorted thither by my friends. So again, this is consistent with what we've been told, is there are different levels of heaven. Now, he calls them different things in the books by G. Powell, which I use. I say levels 1 to 10, and levels 1 to 3 are kind of more associated with Earth. People still feel attached to the culture and maybe the language they were in. And as you go higher and higher, you lose what religion was important to you at the time, and you learn that we're all brothers and sisters. We're all should be loved. So this is something spirits go through. Now, he was probably just in the beginning levels because he started very low and like an outpost in the lower zone. Now, of course, when I say levels 1 to 10 by G. Powell, even the Spirit says everyone has their own naming conventions and the different circles. So there's a lot of gray here. So I'm not saying that I'm an expert in the Spirits that talk to the Reverend G. Powell and say, now there's other people say 7, there's other people say 3. There's graduations. But this is the important part to remember. As you rise in your spiritual quotient, you become more energy and less matter. Now, the people who are the most matter and less energy are us physically on Earth. But then people who die and go to the dark abyss, which is also called a purgatory, there is no eternal damnation according to Spiritism, that they are matter and energy, but a lower ratio of matter to energy as we are physically on Earth. And then as they go higher and higher, they become more and more energy and less matter. And that's why when someone sees a high spirit, who's like here us on Earth or even a lower spirit, they see just kind of light and fuzziness. Now, that's not because they emanate light and fuzziness, but these people are so full of energy that they reflect the love of God, and therefore they look like angels because you can't see. It's kind of, see their face, it's fuzzy, and that's why they appear to angels. But if you were on the same level as that high spirit, it looked normal to you. Okay, we carry on. It lay beyond the peaceful lake and those hills behind which I used to watch the light of that dawning day, which never seemed to grow brighter or advance in the light of dawn, but whose beauties belong to this morning land. Now, again, on the lower levels, it kind of goes along with the 24-hour cycle of Earth, but as you get higher and higher, it's just light. This land lay in an opposite direction from that range of hills beyond which lay the plain of remorse. Here in the morning land, I found that I was to have a little house of my own, a something earned by myself. I've always loved the place of my own, And this little cottage, simple as it was very dear to me. It was indeed a peaceful place. Excuse me a second. I forgot to turn on the light so you can see better. Okay. The green hills shut it in on every side, save in front, where they opened out and the ground stretched away, undulating slopes of green and golden meadow land. There were no trees, no shrubs around my new home, no flowers to gladden my eyes, because my efforts have not yet blossomed into flower. But there was one sweet trailing honeysuckle that clustered around the little porch and shed the fragrance of its love into my rooms. This was the gift of my beloved to me, the spiritual growth of her sweet, pure, loving thoughts, which twined around my dwelling to whisper to me ever of her constant love and truth. There were only two little rooms, the one for me to receive my friends and to study in, and the other my chamber of repose, where I could rest when weary with my work on the earth plane. And in this room there was a picture framed in roses, all my little treasures. The blue sky outside shed down on me so pure a light, my eyes, long wearied to see it, gazed on it again and yet again. The soft green grass and the fragrant honeysuckle were all so sweet, so delicious to me, wearied as I was with my long, dark wanderings, that I was overcome with the emotions of my gratitude. I was aroused by a kindly hand, a loving voice, and looking up, beheld my father. Ah, what a joy, what happiness I felt, and still more when he bade me to come to earth with him and show this home in a vision to her who was its guiding star. What happy hours I can recall when I look back to that, my first home in the spirit land. I was so proud to think I had won it. My present home is far finer. My present sphere is far more beautiful in every way. But I have never felt a greater happiness than I felt when that first home of my own was given to me. I should but weary my readers where I should attempt to describe all the work on the earth plane I did at this time, all the sad ones I helped to cheer and direct upon the better way. There is a sameness in such work that makes one example serve for many. Time passes on for spirits as well as mortals, and brings ever new changes, fresh progression. And thus, while I was working to help others, I was gradually myself learning the lesson which had proved most hard for me to learn, the lesson of that entire forgiveness of our enemies, which will enable us to feel that we not only desire them no harm, but that we even wish to do them good, to return good for evil cordially. It had been a hard struggle to overcome my desire for revenge, or wish that at all events some punishment should overtake the one who had so deeply wronged me. And it was hard, or harder even, to desire now to benefit that person. Again, this is something for all of us to learn. And that's why I keep saying over and over again, when someone does you wrong, don't think of them as that person that did you wrong. Just think of them as an actor in a play or a movie who had a part to play, and it was there to create some stimuli for you to think about it and analyze it and then repair some sort of character defect in yourself. Time and again, while I was working on the earth plane, I went and stood beside that one, unseen and unfelt, save for thoughts of me that would be awakened. And each time I perceived that my enemy's thoughts were to the full as bitter as my own. There was no love lost between us. Standing there, I beheld time after time the events of our lives blended together in one picture. The dark shadows of our passionate hate dimming and blurring these pictures as storm clouds swept over a summer sky. And in the clear light of my spiritual knowledge, I beheld where my faults had lain, as strongly or more so than I beheld those of my enemy. And from such visits, I would return to my little cottage in the spirit land, overwhelmed with the bitterest regrets, the keenest anguish, yet always unable to feel aught but bitterness and anger towards the one whose life seemed only to have been linked by sorrow and wrong to my own. At last, one day, while standing beside this mortal, I became conscious of a new feeling, almost of pity, for this person was also oppressed in soul and conscious of regret in thinking of our past. Get a drink real quick. A wish had arisen that a different course towards me had been followed. Thus was there created between us a kinder thought, which, though faint and feeble, was yet the first fruits of my efforts to overcome my own anger, the first softening and melting of the hard wall of hatred between us, Then there was given to me a chance to assist and benefit this person, even as the chance had before come to me of doing harm. And now I was able to overcome my bitterness and to take advantage of this opportunity. So that was my hand, the hand which had been raised to curse and blight, which was now the one to help instead. My enemy, not conscious of my presence, nor of my interference for good, but felt in a dim fashion that somehow the hatred between us was dead, and that as I was dead, it was perhaps better to let our quarrels die also. This at last came a mutual pardon, which severed the links which had so long bound our earthly lives together. I know that during the earthly life of that one, we shall never cross each other's paths again. But even as I had seen in the case of my friend Benedetto, whose death shall sever the thread of that earthly life, our spirits will meet once again in order that each may ask pardon from the other. Not until then will all links be finally severed between us, and each pass on to our appointed sphere. Great and lasting are the effects upon the soul of our loves and our hates. Long, long after the life of earth is past, do they cling to us, and many of their spirits I've seen tied to each other, not by mutual love, but by mutual hate. And this is the great lesson. This is why, and I've said this many times, Jesus says, forgive 7 times 70, because it's just as Franchezzo says, the spirit world wants you to ask pardon of each other. Both of you have to reconcile your differences, because if you don't, you'll be incarnated in some sort of life and you'll be linked together again until you resolve your conflict. That's why within families there are such harsh conflicts between people, because they were put in that same family, maybe brothers or sisters, sons or daughters, parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, in some manner to get two enemies together, so you're not enemies again. And there's examples of love scorned, and someone who's obsessed with a woman is then born as her son, so he learns the love of a son instead of passionate love, and vice versa with daughters. So these things all happen, and they're all for a reason, done by the spirit world to resolve conflicts and to take that primitive emotions, like he says, you thinking of revenge and bitterness, take it out of your body. Okay, chapter 29, the formation of planets. When I had at last learned the lesson of self-conquest, my mind seemed to be free from a great oppressive weight, and I turned to study of the spirit land and its conditions with renewed interest. At this period of my wanderings, I used to see my friend Hassan very often, and he helped me to an understanding of many things which had perplexed me in my earthly life. And again, he's absolutely correct. Once you free yourself of your base emotions, then your mind is free to look at higher things, to study, to have deep introspection, all those things. And that is important for you and important for your own higher spirituality. On one occasion, when we were seated in my little home enjoying one of my many conversations, I asked him to tell me more of the spheres in relation to the earth. Oh, I wanted to call out someone who just said Bruce Ness in Portland, so I want to say hello to you too. I'll carry on. The term spheres, said he, is, as you have seen, applied to those great belts of spiritual matter which encircle the earth and other planets. It is likewise applied to those still vaster, more extended thought waves which circle throughout all the universe. Thus we may say there are two classes of spheres, those which are in a measure material and encircle each of their planet or their solar system and form the dwelling places of the spiritual inhabitants of each planet. These spheres are divided into circles, indicating, like steps upon the ladder of progress, the moral advancement of the spheres. So, let me give you this is correct. And let me tell you, and I think in a better description of what was given to the Reverend G. Bowen. If you, let me bring this down, let me bring my hands up so I can go. If you think of the earth, right, as this ball and it's circling around the sun. Now, think of the earth as having is the circle in the middle. Then you have other concentric circles around the earth, which are the different levels of heaven. And then you have all the planets surrounding the sun, each with their own higher and higher concentric circles, kind of like a Russian doll, right? All inside of each other of heaven. So then you have all these circles, all these planets surrounding this, rotating around the sun, I should say. And sometimes even their levels of heaven kind of touch and go through each other. So all these different levels of heaven, which are different levels of spiritual ascension within that planet, because there's life on all these planets. They're in different dimensions. I remember in the Spirits book, it says, yeah, there's life on Jupiter. And I thought, oh, the Spirits book, there's no life on Jupiter, but it's in a different dimension. And just in Spirits and Jiva Owen talked about going to a university in one of the levels of heaven around Mars. And he said that the people of Mars look on Earth as we look on Mars. Of course, we're in different dimensions. And you know, when you think of it, and we're in this complex logical construction, and that each of us exists only within the parameters of where we are allowed to see, there's easily different dimensions, different planes of existence. And that's just within the physical world, not to mention the spiritual dimensions. We live in such an exciting environment that people can't even begin to grasp how exciting we are just to be human and be on this campus called Earth, and to know that someday we're going to return to this vastly complex universe where thought is action. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, and there's no science fiction or fantasy that's even close to the reality of the spirit world. Star Wars talks about the Force. Well, it's everywhere around us. There's energy and thought and action. There's nothing. There's no vacuum anywhere. It's all logic. And when you go to heaven and you're this logical being, you're immortal. You won't get sick. You look how you want to look. And then as you go higher and higher in the spirit hierarchy, as you get more love in your heart, fraternity and charity, just like Franchezzo was talking about, you have more and more power to do things. And when you go beyond the bounds of heaven that circle the earth, then you become a real productive member of the spirit society. You help form planets. You help chart the evolution of plants and animals and humans and cultures, or semi-humans or human-like, you know, whatever depends on the planet. I mean, you have no idea. If you just sacrifice a little bit here on Earth and kind of push materialism down to where you need to put it. I'm not saying you have to abandon it, right? You got to live, you got to eat, you have to make sure your family's okay, but give yourself some time for spiritualism. Okay, let me go back up here. Okay, where was I? I always forget. Okay. Okay, the steps, the ladder progress, and moral advancement of the spirits. So yes, he's absolutely correct. Now, let me see, make sure everybody can see this. Yes. The other class of spirits are mental, not material, in their constituents and do not belong to any planetary or solar system, but are limitless as the universe, circling in ever-widening currents of thought emanations from the central point, which around all the universe is held to be revolving, and which point is said to be the immediate environment of the Supreme Being. Now, I've been reading to you also that you see a lot on YouTube and other places like 3D, 4D, 5D. And I believe that if you look at Spiritism, and this is just mine, I haven't read this anywhere, but like 3D is where we are, is where most people are on Earth, involved in materialism, buying into the false vision that are given to us by our corrupt elites, because they keep wanting us to consume all the time. And 4D is where people understand there is a heaven, there is God, there's Jesus watching over all of us, and that we see life on this physical planet for what it is. It is a trial, it is a test, and it's here for us to do better. 5D is what I think they mean, is so 4D is like you're in one of the levels of heaven, and 5D is when you start becoming part of the whole universe, and therefore you're maybe even above the class of the heavens surrounding the earth. And then there is a level above that, which they call 60, which the spirits with Jiva Owen says that is, they call it from the subjective to the objective to the sublime. The subjective is here on earth, meaning that that what is there, right? It's subjective. We can't change it. Objective is how you see it. Your mind can change things, which is heaven, and it's a spirit universe. But above all of that, even probably above the what he's saying, the circles and ever widening currents of thought emanation, still probably 5D, is you become this part of this all. You're still unique. You're still yourself. You're still your own personality, but you become part of all. That's my interpretation. I don't know about other people's interpretation. I think most people don't understand what they mean. And people think they do are just trying to grasp them, but that's mine. Okay, let me carry on. From those from whom these thought waves are held to proceed. That's from the core of the Supreme Being. It may perhaps make my meaning still clearer to say there is one great sphere of the intellectual faculties or attributes belonging essentially to the soul, and then to divide this sphere into circles such as circles of philosophy, of art, of music, of literature. I don't quite understand what he means by the one great sphere of intellectual faculty. I don't quite where he's getting at, that there's probably different attributes of each spirit, and I don't think there's one sphere of each. So we'll have to see about that. It is a common mode of expression to call them spheres, but to my mind it's more correct to describe them as circles. These intellectual circles, like great wheels, enclose all the lesser wheels, those spiral rings. Okay, he's probably, now that he says that, he's probably thinking that you need to master each one of these as you go higher and higher. And I don't know how correct that is. It may be somewhat correct, because I do know what we've been told is that with each sphere, let's just talk about the 10 spheres of heaven around the earth, is you rise in spheres because you're spiritually more mature, but then you also go to colleges and research groups, and you have to get more knowledge of the spirit world, and so you need to do both. And when you graduate, there's no time limits. When you're ready, they put you up. And it may be that some of these things are things you have to learn and become more proficient with. I'm not sure. And that's why he says these intellectual circles, like great wills, enclose all the lesser wills. And of course, when you are, let's say, on the 7th level of heaven, you've gotten knowledge of everything lower. In fact, you can actually travel everywhere lower, right? You cannot travel in higher levels of heaven because it's too bright and it doesn't feel good to you. In other words, if you're looking at it in a database way, you don't have that permission in your parameters. And that's what we call the intellectual circles. You can look at, and a lot of people try to describe it in spatial relationships because that's how we think, but you can also describe it in database and computer science ways, is where you're this logical entity, and then you have a set of permissions to roam and be in different places. And when you go to different places, you're actually where you are. It's just that you've changed the parameters of your environment. Those are different ways of looking at things. Whatever way that helps you the best. And then he says in this, okay, the intellectual circles, like great wheels, enclose all those lesser wheels, those spiral rings which surround each their own solar system, our parent planet, wheels within wheels, revolving around one great center continually. In the spirit world, only those who are in sympathy ever remain together. And in Spiritism, that is the law of affinity. Those people, again, when you pass over, the law of affinity decides where you should go. You go in the 1st level of heaven, the 5th level of heaven. You go in the lower zone. Where in the lower zone? You go in the dark abyss, which is a type of purgatory. What type of area will you go? It's all there. You go with people like you. So if you're a criminal and a pickpocket and corrupt, guess what? You go to those same people. And also, guess what? You get to enjoy people just like you. That's the function. When people say, God forgives all. Jesus forgives all. He loves us all. Yes, he loves you. But if you've been a criminal, even if you, in the last moment, you tell the priest or whoever, I repent. No. If you just say repent because you're trying to get out of something, The law of affinity will take you where you belong so you can learn. It's not for punishment. It's for you to be with people who were like you in the physical world so you can see what it feels like to live with people that treat you like you treat them. It's the opposite of the golden rule. Others treat you as you treated others. But you learn, and you learn that you don't like that, and then the spirit world will help you out of that and help you in the higher spheres. But it's all up to us. We can be as stubborn and as stupid as we would like, or we can be open and humble and willing to learn as fast as we like. In this, I'll carry on. In the spirit world, only those who are in sympathy ever remain together, and through the ties of relationship with the links of kind remembrances may at times draw together those who have no common bonds of union. These will be but flying visits, and each will return to their own circle and sphere, drawn back by the strong magnetic attraction which holds each sphere in each circle of a sphere in unison. A spirit belonging to the sphere of music or philosophy will be drawn to others of a like disposition. Now, there are areas within each sphere that major, let's say, or focus, concentrate on music or philosophy, but they're not individual spheres. He could be calling these things that he probably mistaken about that. Will be drawn to others of a like disposition, who are in the same stage of moral advancement as himself, but his development of a higher degree of music or philosophy will not enable him to ascend into a higher circle of the moral spheres, or planetary spheres, than his moral development entitles him to occupy. So, yes, you've got to be moral, and you also have to know certain things. Now, I don't know if it's that you got to know music really well and be moral. That may be, but music and philosophy is not their own spheres. It's a combination of moral and spiritual knowledge of the spirit universe, right? You don't just go to the universe and you know everything. You have to learn. That's part of the excitement of being in heaven. If you, unlike what people think is that you die and you become this all-knowing angel. No, you'll start remembering your past lives, not right away, but when you're ready, and you'll remember a lot of things. But you're always going to be learning more about the spirit universe, right? It's never ending. It's exciting. Okay. The central suns of each of the vast intellectual circles of the mental sphere shine as burnished magnets. They are as great prisms, glowing with celestial fires of purity and truth, and darting on all sides their glorious rays of knowledge. And in these rays cluster the multitudes of spirits who are seeking to light their lamps at these glowing shrines. In those rays which reach the earth pure and unbroken are found those germs of truth which have illuminated the minds of men in all ages of the world's history, and shattered into 1,000 fragments the great rocks of error and darkness, even as the lightning flash shivers a granite rock, letting into the depth below the clear light of God's sun. And those spirits who are most highly advanced are those nearest to the central force, to the dazzling light of the star-like centers. These great spheres of intellectual and moral faculties may then be termed universal spheres, those around each planet planetary spheres, and those surrounding the sun solar spheres. The first being understood to consist of thought or sound essence, the others of various degrees of spiritualized matter. So there are spheres within spheres within spheres. I don't know, and I think his idea, those around each planet are planetary spheres. I agree with that. There are spheres around solar systems, which is probably talking about the sun centers, and then there's spheres around maybe constellations, right? I just forgot what arm of the Milky Way galaxy we are, but then there's that, and maybe there could be all sorts of things like that. Okay, then he asks, and how then would you describe the creation of a planet and its spheres? So this is his answer. The creation of a planet may be said to begin from the time it is cast off from the parent sun in the form of nebulous matter, fiery vapor. In this stage is the most powerful magnet, attracting itself to the minute particles of matter which flow through the ether of space. This ether is supposed to be void of all material atoms, such as float in the atmosphere of planets, but that is an incorrect supposition. The fact that the atoms of matter are simply subdivided into even more minute particles compared to which a grain of sand is as the bulk of the sun to the earth. These atoms are thus subdivided and dispersed through space instead of being clustered by the force of magnetic attraction in the planet into atoms the size of those which float as motes in the Earth's atmosphere. have become not only invisible to man's material sight, but are also incapable of being detected by ordinary chemical means at his disposal. They are, in fact, etherealized and have become of the first degree of spirit matter, and consequent of the amount of soul essence which have become amalgamated with their grosser elements. In becoming attracted to the glowing mass of an embryo plant, these atoms become so thickly clustered together that the more ethereal elements are pressed out and escape back into space, leaving the solid gross portion to form the rock, etc. Through the constant attracting of fresh atoms, the necessary vast increase of pressure thus caused, these atoms exist eternally and are indestructible as are all other elements which constitute the universe, and they are absorbed and cast off again by planet after planet as each passes through the various stages of its existence and development. Now, so he's right about etherealized matter. In fact, Spiritism calls this universal fluid. And spirits use universal fluid, and then they use that and put it in different vibrations and harmony to create all the matter that we know of and more that we don't know of. But the way the solar system was created was, as he's saying, using this matter, which I'll call universal fluid. But it was directed not just by some sort of what we think is in natural law. It was directed by the actions of a group of spirits, as Jesus Christ was one of them, that through their will formed this universal fluid, to form the sun and to form the planets. And in fact, Jesus was in charge of forming our planet, the planet Earth. He's also in charge of other planets as well. There are other spirits who are on the same level, and there are spirits higher than Jesus Christ. But for us, Jesus Christ is our Father, and we cannot know God until we. And actually, the spirits around the spheres of heaven, around the earth, even say they don't know God very well, as far as we don't. You have to get higher and higher. The only way to understand at all who God is to understand Jesus, because then you can kind of get a shadow of what God is. So these high spirits, through their will, just like spirits in heaven, through their will construct a house, an ocean, a mountain. They will take universal fluid and they will compact it, put it in different vibrations, everything, and make it to what they want it to be. I'll carry on. The atoms of matter may be broadly classed into three heads, and again, in each of the three heads may be subdivided into an infinite number of degrees of density in order to express the various stages of sublimation to which they have attained. The three principal classes may be termed material or planetary matter, spirit or soul enveloping matter, which is no longer visible to material sight, and soul essence. The last being so sublimated, it's not possible for me to describe its nature to you. And so again, what Spiritism says is there's universal fluid, and then there is intelligence, right? And that's what he's probably talking soul, the soul essence. There's this function of intelligence which they bring, and we're probably the offspring of that. Of material matter, the lowest, most gross form is that of which mineral substances, such as rocks, earth, etc., are formed. And these are thrown off into the atmosphere as dust and reabsorbed continually to be changed by the process, continually going on in nature everywhere, into plants, etc. Now remember, we could have started out as mineral rocks, as these very simple routines, very simple conglomerations of logical structures. The intermediate degree between the rocks and the planet and the plants is fluidic, in which the more solid particles are held in solution by the various gases or vaporized forms of the chemical elements which constitute them. And also, then remember too, as the spirits have told us, nothing stays in place. Nothing, the sun, the earth, the walls, unless it's the will of a high spirit. The will of a high spirit keeps everything together. Once that high spirit says, okay, I'm not interested in that anymore, it will tend to disappear. It's like a flower in the heavens. Someone will pick a flower. Now on earth, if you pick a flower and put it in a vase, it will decay. In heaven, you pick a flower, it will stay as beautiful as you want until you stop thinking about it, or until it has some sort of time limit decided by the spirit who created that flower, and then it will just fade away and disappear. There's no decay. The second degree of material matter is that of plant or vegetable life, which is nourished by the blending of the most gross matter with the fluidic. Thus, through infinite graduations of earthly matter, we reach the highest, namely flesh and bones and muscles, which, whether it clothes the soul of man or of one of the lower animals, is still the highest degree of material matter, containing in this highest degree of earthly material development all those elements of which the lower degrees are composed. The second, or spiritual form of matter, is, as I said, merely the etherealized development of the first earthly form of matter, with the soul essence as the animating principle of both. The divine germ, which is that Spiritism will call it intelligence, which is the first two forms of matter, cannot exist. It is part of the law of the first two classes of matter that you should close the higher soul principle, or they lose their power of cohesion and are diffused into their spiritual parts again. So really what that is he's saying that this is the will. This is almost like gravity, right? Is the wheel of keeping them together. The divine germ, right? He says the divine germ without which the first two forms of matter could not exist. It is part of the law of the first two classes that you should close the higher soul principle or they lose their power of cohesion. So he's saying this in a different way, but there's no cohesion without some higher willpower and focus of a higher spirit, a high Lord spirit of saying these things should be together. Soul matter is the only one which possesses any permanent identity. It is the true ego. Thus, by no power can it be disintegrated or lose its individuality. It is the true life of whatever lower forms of matter it may animate, again, and shape that lower matter into its own identity. Soul essence is in and of every type of life, and that's the intelligent principle. From the mineral and vegetable to man, the highest type of animal. Each of these types is capable of development into the highest of celestial form, in which state it is found in the heavenly sphere of each planet and each solar system. So he does say correctly that you may start out small, but you have the capability within you to develop in higher and higher, more complicated forms. And that's what we are here on Earth. We are just an example of being immature free will spirits, but we were very, we may have been plants and animals and that type of stuff, amoebas, which you all study in high school science. And but as we got more sophisticated, we learned more and more, then we became able to control our free will spirit. And now we're in this planet of atonement where we have to learn our next big leap, and that is to get rid of all those wonderful, emotions that kept us alive. Pride and selfishness, they all did very well when you were an animal trying to survive amongst the fittest, but those things we have to get rid of now. We have to move on. Since then, we maintain that everything has its soul of higher or lower type. It need not create surprise in the mind of any mortal. Be told that there are plants and flowers, rocks and deserts, beasts and birds in the spirit world. And in fact, let me stop there for a second. Everything on earth is a copy in some form, and not exactly, of what was in the spirit world first. There's nothing on earth that wasn't thought out and existing in the spirit world and then adapted to the environment of the earth in some shape or form. I'll carry on. They exist there in a spiritualized or developed state and are more etherealized as they advance higher in accordance with the same law which governs alike the development of man, the highest type, and that of the lowest form of soul, matter. When a plant dies or the solid rock is dispersed in the dust or fused in the gas, its soul essence passes within the spiritual matter pertaining to it into the spirit world, and to that sphere to which its development is most akin. The most material portion being absorbed by the earth, the more sublimated particles of matter feeling less of the earth attraction and thereby floating farther from it. Thus, in the early stages of a plant's life, wherein it possesses but a small portion of the soul essence and a large amount of gross matter, its spheres are thrown out first in the direction farthest from the sun and are very material, and the development of the spiritual inhabitants is very low. So, let me give you a picture of this. And this is a picture of a human. Let me hide this for a second. So if we look at what is being said, is this spark releases all the physical gross matter, and then the etherealized form then goes back into the spirit world. It's essentially what we do when we incarnate and then we leave our physical body, because we are a spirit, which is a an application or a group of logical constructs which spirits call a personality. We are a personality. That spirit is a personality. The perispirit is our outside covering of what we look like to other spirits and how we perceive ourselves. And our spirit mind can modify the perispirit to make it like, let's say I go to heaven and I'm not partially bald anymore. I don't have hair growing on my ears. I lose my stomach, right? I can do all that. I can look younger. I can do all that with my mind. The perispirit is attached to your body, and it controls every cell in your body. Now, when that perispirit, and when the time limit is up for that perispirit, for that body to die on Earth, according to your pre-planning, it removes itself. It cuts that cord from the body, and it lets all that matter just go back into the earth. But where the soul essence, right, your spirit essence, goes back into the spirit world. So you can see by this picture, you'll see the more etherealized and the more, spiritual elements, meaning that it has energy and thought and intelligence principle associated with it. Okay, let me bring this back up. Oh, wrong one. Get back to the PDF. Here we go. Okay. At this early stage, the vegetable as well as the animal are coarse and gross, wanting refinement and beauty, which may be observed as the evolution of the planet advances. Gradually, hold on a second. I lost my cup of mine. Gradually, the vegetation changes, the animal changes. The races of men who appear become higher and more perfect, and as a consequence, the spiritual emanations thrown off become correspondingly higher. In the first stages of a planet's life, the spheres scarcely exist and be likened to a cone in shape, the small end represented by the planet itself. The Earth plane being the highest sphere which has developed. The lower spheres, by reason of the degraded taste and low intellectual development of the planet's inhabitants, being like the white end of the cone. As the planet develops, the spheres increase in size and number, and the higher ones begin to form at the point of the cone receding from the planet towards the sun as each of the higher spheres begin its existence. So let me explain this a bit. I like the way he explains it, but I'm not sure everybody understands it. When a planet is primitive and there's life on it, there's not these levels of heaven above, because there's no one there. It's just kind of like this, real close to the planet. As human souls become into humans' bodies, and then as they die, when the Earth was mostly just full of primitive tribesmen, there was really no heavenly spheres because they all went to the lower zone. But then as people became more spiritual and more educated, then these heavenly spheres started appearing because of the mental emanations from these people, and the higher spheres helped develop these things. And therefore, instead of being bottom heavy, the Earth is now more balanced. Now, what we're being told is there's 7 billion people on Earth approximately. We're said that around on the heavens, the Earth, and then the lower zones and the dark abyss, which is like a purgatory, there's 21 billion souls. So there's 14 billion that are spirits that are not part of the Earth. And only about 30% of those people, of the 14 billion, are in heaven. The rest are in the lower zones. Okay, thus are the spheres formed below and above the planet by constant influx of the atoms thrown off from the parent planet. At each stage of their formation, when the intellectual and selfish propensities of the man are more highly developed than his moral and unselfish faculties, these lower spheres in extent greatly exceed the higher ones, and these may be termed the dark ages of the world's history, when oppression and cruelty and greed spread their dark wings over mankind. After a time, the eternal law of the higher evolution of all things causes the higher and lower spheres to become equal in extent and number. Then we may see the forces of good and evil equally balanced, and this period may be termed the meridian of the planet's life. And that's about where we are. We're getting there. The spirit will decided we're going to start the steps to be a planet of regeneration from a planet of atonement. Planet of atonement is we're here to pay for our past wrongs. The planet of regeneration can be there's going to be less negative spirits. Eventually, all those spirits in the lower zone and below are going to be sent to other planets, and we'll be surrounded just by good spirits. But we're not there. It's going to take a while to go there. Let's see what he says next. Next follows the period when, by gradual improvement of mankind, the figure of the cone becomes gradually reversed. The earth plane becoming again the narrow end by reason of the shrinking and disappearance of the lower spheres, while the higher ones expand towards the highest of all. Till the last, only this highest sphere exists at all, and the planet itself shrinks gradually away till all the material gross particles have been thrown off from it, and it vanishes from existence, all its gross atoms floating away imperceptibly to be reabsorbed by other planets, yet in the process of formation. Now, that doesn't mean the planet disappears. We may still be part of the planet, but our Earth will become an advanced planet where we will be in a lighter form. We'll communicate more with the spirit world. We'll live to 1,000 years. We'll float instead of walk heavily. So it vanishes from this dimension, but it will be into a new higher dimension. Then he carries on. Then will the sphere of this planet, together with its inhabitants, become absorbed into the great spheres of its solar system, and in its inhabitants will exist there, as do already many communities of spirits whose planets have passed out of existence. So he's saying existence, but he means existence in this dimension, a gross material dimension. Each planetary community, however, will retain the correct characteristics and individuality of their planet, just as different nationalities on Earth too, till they gradually merge into the larger nationality of their solar system. So gradual, so imperceptible are these processes of development. So vast the periods of time they take to accomplish, that the mind of mortal man may be forgiving to failing to grasp the immensity of the changes which take place. The lives of all the planets are not similar in their duration, because size and position in the solar system, as well as other causes, contribute to modify and slightly alter their development. But the broad features will in all cases be found the same, just as the matter of which each planet is composed shows no chemical substance which does not exist to a greater or less degree in every other. Thus we are able to judge from the condition of the planet around us what has been the history of our Earth in the past and what will be its ultimate destiny. Yes, so you can see from the glow of the soul and the combined emanations from the spirits on Earth, you can see exactly where we are at. Then Franchezzo asks, if, as you say, our spirits have become absorbed into the sun center, will our individually as spirits become merged in that of the solar system? And he says, no, most certainly not. Absolutely true. The individuality of each soul germ is indestructible. It is but a minute unit in the vast ocean of soul life, but it's still a distinct unit. The personality of each being, in fact, its ego. It is this very individuality, this very impossibility of dispersing or destroying the soul, which constitutes its immortality, which distinguishes it from all other matter and makes its nature so difficult of explanation or analysis. You have become a member of our Brotherhood of Hope, yet you retain your individuality, and so it is with the soul eternally, no matter through what conditions of existence it may pass. Very true. God does not want us all to be automatons and be robots all the same. God wants uniqueness, but they also want uniqueness, but also loving, serving, wonderful, working together uniqueness. Think how hard it is to do that. That's why it takes billions of years for us to become what we've become. But they do it. They keep us uniqueness, our own little sense of humor, but we're all nice, wonderful people. That's why we go through the chaos on Earth, is to rip out all these primitive emotions and make us better people. And we got more than one life to do that. And when you see someone really screwing things up, just say, God bless you, it'll be better the next time. Okay. I'll carry on. Try to imagine a body so light that most etherealized vapor is heavily beside it, yet a body possessing such power of cohesion that it is utterly impossible to disintegrate its particles. The power of resistance against all material or spiritual forms of matter which it possesses being equal to that of which a bar of steel offers to a cloud of vapor. Imagine this and you will realize how it is that as a spirit you can pass through solid doors and walls of earthly matter, and how a spirit higher than yourself can pass with equal ease through the walls of spiritual matter which surround us here. The more perfectly the soul is freed from gross matter, the less it can be bound by any element. Again, as they talk about, the higher and higher is the higher ratio of energy to matter. And the greater it becomes its power, since it is not the soul essence, but is dense envelope which can be imprisoned on earth or in the spheres. To you now, the walls of earthly houses offer no impediment to free ingress or egress. You pass through them as easily as your earthly body used to pass through the fog. The density of fog may be disagreeable to you, but it cannot arrest your progress. Moreover, when you pass through a fog, there's no vacuum left to show where your passage through it had been. This is because the elements of which the fog was composed were attracted together again too quickly for you to perceive where they had been dispersed. And that is exactly what happens when we spirits pass through a material door or wall, the material atoms of which it's composed closing after our progress even more quickly than the fog. Okay, all true. And a very good description. Then he says, I understand you, and now, as if you say each type of soul essence has a distinct individuality of its own, you will not agree that those who believe in the transmigration of the soul of an animal of the lower type into a man and vice versa. And he says, certainly not. Again, Spiritism exactly says this. We do never, we always progress, we never go backwards. A human cannot go into a dog or a cat. No, it's not going to happen. You can be sent to a more primitive planet for you to learn things you need to learn, but no, there is no transmigration of soul into a lower life form. I'll carry on. The soul of each type we hold to be capable of the highest degree of development in its own type, but the soul of man being the highest type of all, therefore capable of the highest degree of development, namely in those advanced spirits we call angels. And again, this is all true. Angels are souls who have passed from the lowest degree of human planetary life through all the planetary spheres till they have attained to the celestial sphere of our solar system, our heaven of heavens. Angels, now many people believe angels were independently created by God. No, angels are us. But they're us, vastly more experienced, vastly more full of love, vastly wiser, wonderful people. The same as demons are, what people call devil. There's no devil created by God. Are demons. These are us who are still in their primitive state, who haven't learned, and no one's a demon or no one's in this lower zone forever. Some I know has been told, some have been in this lower zone, dark abyss, purgatory for 10,000 years, but someday they will still rise out of that. We believe the soul will go on mounting continually as ever widening spiral rings till it's reached what we now term the center of the universe. But whether when we do attain that summit of our present aspirations, we shall not find it to be but a finite point revolving around a still greater center, I cannot say. Again, this is what the spiritual Reverend G. Bowen. They have no idea. As far as they're concerned, it goes on, circle after circle. This is why immortality is going to be a lot of fun. You're always going to learn something new. It's going to be exciting. My own feeling is that we shall attain to center after center, ever resting as it may be millions of years in each, till our aspiration shall again urge us to heights as far again above us. The more one contemplates of subjects, the more vast and limitless it becomes. How then can we hope to see an end to our journey through that which has no end and has no beginning? And how can we even hope to form any clear idea of the nature and attributes of that supreme being whom we hold to be the omnipotent ruler of the universe, seeing that we cannot even fully and clearly grasp the magnitude of his creation? And again, that's why they say even spirits cannot understand God, because it's so far above them. So that is the end of those two chapters, which is very close to what Spiritism has said. So think about this. Spiritism came to us in the 1850s, codified by Allan Kardec. And again, this is because it was sent to us in the New Testament. If you love me, keep my commands, in John chapter 14, verses 15 and 17. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another consoler to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. This is how the Spirit's book was created. Allan Kardec codified. He asked a series of 1,019 questions. The Spirit of truth organized all the spirits talking to the different mediums. And then this book, the Spirit's book, was created. Now, what I would urge people to do is to dip your toe into Spiritism, is to download my book. It's in PDF. You can also get it, of course, in Kindle and paperback from my website, nwspiritism.com. It's also in French if you want to download and PDF in French. And it's just less than 100 pages. It kind of goes through the central tenets of Spiritism. Spiritism is not a religion. It is a doctrine, a philosophy. And therefore, I would do that. And then I would, if it depends on how you like to learn. I mean, you do any order you want. I'm sure you know better than I do your own learning capability and how you like. Some people like to hear things, some like to read things. Some people want to see the detail before they see the whole. To me, it's like I kind of like to see a summary of the whole before I dive into the detail so I understand the detail better. And then you can read the Spirit's book. Of course, then Allan Kardec has other books. But I would read the Spirit's book next and you can get this if you click on the picture of Allan Kardec on my website, it'll take you to the FEB bookstore. You can buy it there. You can also, as I said before, download it in PDF or buy it on Amazon or your local bookstore, order through your local bookstore. And then it's what you do next is up to you. I have 15 other books in which I think a good one for people to read. It kind of gives you the whole summary of what I'm talking about and dive into much more detail. The spirit realm, the physical realm, what you need as a spirit, what your future is going to be, how you can progress. Is I would read the spirit realm. Spiritism has revealed the reality of our existence. And then it depends on you what you want to go through. I have other books like Heaven and Below, talking about heaven, and really getting the detail from stories by Reverend G. Val Owen and from other, and then commenting on what was sent to the Reverend G. Val Owen from other Spiritist books by Spiritist mediums. And then I'll have Spirit in the Spirit Universe, which is book 2. Heaven and Below is book 1. Spirit in the Spirit Universe is book 2. And then book 3 is How We Are Guided by Spirits. So those are all things you can do. And then you can see behind me, I got books like The Problem is a Solution, 7 Life Complications Sent to Test and Teach You. I have the 7 Tenets of Spiritism, talking about how I found out about Spiritism, what it means to me. I mean, all sorts of things that you can read about and do. And there's other books. Books by Chico Xavier, Divaldo Franco, Leon Denis. You can find most of his on PDF. So there's a lot of things you can do. And of course, and How to Live is really how to get your set you up with I think it's 24 steps to look at yourself, analyze yourself, and prepare yourself to rise up high in the heaven. Anyway, I hope that helps. And thank you for everybody for listening to me tonight. And remember, I have live stream now Sundays, which I'm talking about an aspect of Spiritism. Mondays, I do Q&A about Spiritism. Please join me then. And on Tuesdays, I try to read other books that are not by Spiritist mediums per se, but then I look at them through the lens of Spiritism. And it just shows you there's so much literature out there which parallels what have been told to us by spirits. They're trying to tell us any way they can what life is really like and why we are here. God bless.